Babu Krishna Gopal Sirkar, Zamindar of Zikrkota, made over his estate to his eldest son and retired to the holy city of Banaras, as befits a good Hindu, to spend the evening of his life in religious devotion. All the poor and the destitute of the neighborhood were in tears at the parting. Everyone declared that such pity and benevolence were rare in these degenerate days. His son Bipin Bihari was a young man well educated on modern lines. Holding the degree of Bachelor of Arts, he sported a pair of spectacles, wore a beard, and seldom mixed with others. His private life was unsullied. He did not even smoke and never touched cards. He was a man of stern disposition, though he looked soft and pliable. This trait of his character soon came home to his tenantry in diverse ways. Unlike his father, he would on no account allow a remission of one single pice out of the rents justly due to him. Under no circumstances would he grant any tenant one single day's grace in paying up. On taking over management of the property, Bipin Bihari discovered that his father had allowed a large number of Brahmins to hold land entirely rent-free, and a larger number to hold at rents much below the prevailing rates. His father was incapable of resisting the importunate solicitation of others. Such was the weakness of his character. Bipin Bihari said this could never be. He could not in this way abandon the income of half his property, and he reasoned with himself thus. Firstly, the person who were in actual enjoyment of the concession and getting fat at his expenses were a lot of worthless people and so undeserving of charity. Charity bestowed on such objects only encourage idleness. Secondly, living nowadays had become much costlier than in the days of his ancestors. Bonds has increased space. For a gentleman to keep up his position had become 4 times as expensive as in days past. So he could not afford to scatter gifts right and left as his father had done. On the contrary, it was his burden duty to call back as many as of them as he possibly could. So, Bipin Bihari lost no time in carrying into effect what he conceived to be his duty. He was a man of strict principles. What had gone out of his grasp returned to him little by little. Only a very small portion of his father's grants did he allow to remain undisturbed, and he took good care to arrange that those even should not be deemed permanent. The wails of the Titans reached Krishna Gopal at Banaras through the post. Some even made a journey to that place to represent their grievances to him personally. Krishna Gopal wrote to his son, intimating his displeasure. Bipin Bihari replied, pointing out how the time had changed. In former days, he said, the Zamindar was compensated for the gifts he made by the many customary presents he used to receive from his tenantry. Recent statutes had made all such imposition illegal. The Zamindar had now to rest content with just the stipulated rent and nothing more. Unless, he continued, we keep a strict watch over the realization of our just dues. What would be left to us? Since the Titans won't give us any extra now, how can we allow them concession? Our relation must henceforth be strictly contractual. We shall be ruined if we go on making gifts and endowments, and the preservation of our property and the keeping up of our position will be rendered extremely difficult. Krishna Gopal became very uneasy at finding that time should have changed so. Well, he murmured to himself. The younger generation know best, I suppose. Our out-of-date methods won't do now. If I interfere, my son might refuse to manage the property and insist on my going back. No, thank you. I would rather not. The few days that are left to me, I would much rather devote them to the service of my God. So things went on. Bipin Bihari puts his affairs in audit much after litigation in the courts and less constitutional methods outside. Most of the Titans submitted to his will out of fear. Only a fellow called Asimuddin, son of Mirza Bibi, still remained refractory. Bipin's displeasure was keenest as regards this man. He could quite understand his father's having granted rent-free lands to Brahmins, but why this Mohammedan should be holding so much land, some free and some rents lower than the prevailing rates, was a riddle to him. And what was he? The son of low Mohammedan widow, giving himself airs and defying the whole world, simply because he had learned to read and write a little at the village school? To Bipin, it was intolerable. He made inquiries of his officers about Asimuddin's holdings. All that they could tell him was that Babu Krishna Gopal himself had made these grants to the family many years back. But they had no idea as to what his motive might have been. They imagined, however, that perhaps the widow won the compassion of the kind-hearted zamindar by representing to him her woe and misery. To Bipin, this favour seems to be utterly undeserved. He had not seen the pitiable condition of these people in days gone by. Their comparative ease of the present day and their arrogance drove him to the conclusion that they had impudently swindled his tender-hearted father out of a part of his legitimate income. Asimuddin was a stiff-necked sort of a fellow, too. He vowed that he would lay down his life sooner than give up an inch of his land. Open hostilities ensued. The poor old widow tries her best to pacify her son. "It is no good fighting with Zamindar," she would often say to him. "His kindness has kept us alive so long. Let us depend upon him still. Though he may curtail his favours, surrender to him part of the lands as he desires." "Oh, mother!" protested Asimuddin. "What do you know of these matters, pray?" One by one, Asimuddin lost his cases instituted against him. The most he lost his zid increased the more. For the sake of his all, he staked all that was his. One afternoon, Mirza Bibi collected some fruits and vegetables from her little garden and, unbeknown to her son, went and sought an interview with Bipin Babu. She looked at him with a tenderness maternal in its intensity and spoke, "May Allah bless you, my son. Do not destroy Asim. It wouldn't be right of you. To your charge, I commit him. Take him as though he were one whom it is your duty to support, as though he were a never-do-well younger brother of yours. Vast is your wealth. Don't grudge him a small particle of it, my son." This assumption of familiarity on the part of the garrulous old woman annoyed Bipin not a little. "What do you know of these things, my good woman?" he condescended to say. "If you have any representations to make, send your son to me." Being assured for the second time that she knew nothing about these affairs, Mirza Bibi returned home wiping her eyes with her apron all the way and offering her silent prayers to Allah. The litigation dragged its weary length from the criminal to the civil courts and thence to the High Court, where at last Asimuddin met with a partial success. 18 months passed in this way, but he was a ruined man now, plugged in debts up to his very ears. His creditors took this opportunity to execute the decrees they had obtained against him. A date was fixed for putting up to auction every stick and stone that he had left. It was Monday. The village market had assembled by the side of a tiny river, now swollen by the rains. Buying and selling was going on partly on the bank and partly in the boats moored there. The hubbub was great. Among the commodities for sale, jackfruits preponderated, it being the month of Asad. Hilsa fish were seen in large quantities also. The sky was cloudy. Many of the stall holders, apprehending a downpour, had stretched a piece of cloth overhead across bamboo poles put up for the purpose. Asimuddin had come too, but he had not a copper with him. No shopkeepers allowed him credit nowadays. He therefore had bought a brass thali and a dao with him. This he would pawn and then buy his necessaries. Towards evening, Bipin Babu was out for a walk attended by 2 or 3 retainers armed with lathis. Attracted by the noise, he directed his step towards the market. Getting there, he stepped a while before the stall of Dwari, the oilman, and made kindly inquiries about his business. All on a sudden, Asimuddin raised his dhow and ran towards Bipin Babu, roaring like a tiger. The market people caught hold of him halfway and quickly disarmed him. He was forthwith given in custody of the police. Business in the market then went on as casual. We cannot say that Bipin Babu was not inwardly pleased at this incident. It is intolerable that the creature we are hunting down should turn around and show fight. The badmash. Bipin chuckled. I have got him at last. The ladies of Bipin Babu's house, when they heard the news, exclaimed with horror, Oh, the ruffian! What a mercy they seized him in time. They found consolation at the prospect of the man being punished as he richly deserved. In another part of the village, the same evening the widow's humble cottage, devoid of bread and barefoot of her son, became darker than death. Others dismissed the incident of the afternoon from their minds, sat down to their meals, retired to bed and went to sleep. But to the widow, the event loomed larger than anything else in this wide world. But alas, who was there to combat it? Only a bundle of wearied bones and a helpless mother's heart trembling with fear. 3 days have passed in the meanwhile. Tomorrow the case will come up for trial before a deputy magistrate. Bipin Babu will have to be examined as a witness. Never before this did a zamindar of Zikr Kota appear in the witness box. But Bipin did not mind. The next day at the appointment hour, Bipin Babu arrived at the court in palanquin in great state. He wore a turban on his head and a watch chain dangled on his breast. The deputy magistrate invited him to sit on the dais, beside his own. The courtroom was crowded to suffocation. A sensation of this magnitude had not been witnessed in this court for many years. When the time for the case to be called on drew near, a chaprasi came and whispered something in Bipin Babu's ear. He got up very much agitated and walked out begging the deputy magistrate to excuse him for a few minutes. Coming outside, he saw his old father, little way off, standing under a banyan tree, barefooted and wrapped in a piece of namavli. A string of beads was in his hand. His slender form shone with a gentle luster, and tranquil compassion seemed to radiate from his forehead. Bipin, hampered by his close-fitting trouser and his flowing chupkan, touched his father's feet with his forehead. In doing so, his turban came off and kissed his nose, and his watch popped out of his pocket and swung to and fro in the air. Bipin adjusted his attire hurriedly and begged his father to come to his pleader's house close by. No, thank you, Krishna Gopal replied. I will tell you here what I have got to say. A curious crowd had gathered there by this time. Bipin's attendants pushed them back. Krishna Gopal then said, You must do what you can do to get Asim acquainted and restore him the lands that you have taken away from him. Is it for this, father? Said Bipin, very much surprised. Did you have come all the way from Banaras? Would you tell me why you have made them the objects of your special favor? What would you gain by knowing it, my boy? But Bipin persisted. It is only his father, he went on. I have revoked many a grant because I thought the parties were not deserving. There were many Brahmins amongst them, but you have never said a word then. Are you so keen about these Mohammedans now? After all that has happened, if I drop this case against Asim and give him back his lands, what shall I say to people? Krishna Gopal maintained a silence for some moments.